All right, welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're digging into the ghost in the machine of blockchain scaling. We're talking about a forgotten solution that was supposed to save Ethereum, and, in a way, it actually did, just not at all how anyone expected.
So if you're in the crypto space at all, you've heard about rollups, right? Arbitrum, Optimism, they're pretty much the way we scale Ethereum now. But what you might not know is that they are standing on the shoulders of a giant, a really ambitious and now kind of forgotten technology that first tried to solve crypto's biggest problem. To really get this story, we have to jump in our time machine and go way back to Ethereum's first big existential crisis, a time when the world computer was literally about to buckle under the weight of its own success.
Okay, so Ethereum's big promise, right? It was meant to be this decentralized computer for the whole world. But it had this dirty little secret. It was incredibly, painfully slow. And this wasn't just a minor issue. It was a huge fundamental bottleneck that threatened the entire project.
15. That's it, just 15 transactions per second for the entire global network. Now, in the very early days, that was fine. But as we started to see the first hints of things like DeFi and NFTs, that little trickle of transactions became a fire hose aimed at a tiny garden hose.
I mean, 15 TPS, it just sounds like a number until you put it into context. In the same second that Ethereum handles 15 transactions, PayPal processes hundreds. Visa handles thousands. So you have to ask, how could Ethereum ever become a global financial layer when it was moving at a tiny fraction of a percent of the speed of the systems we already had?
And look, this wasn't just some theoretical problem on a whiteboard. For you, for me, for actual users, it was a total nightmare. The network basically became a massive digital traffic jam. Gas fees to do something simple, like send a token, just exploded. Sometimes the fee cost more than the token you were sending. It was slow, it was expensive, and it was just deeply, deeply frustrating for everyone.
So the whole community was desperate for a solution. And then, in 2017, this really audacious, ambitious proposal shows up that promises to save the whole network. And it was called Plasma.
Now, this wasn't just some random idea from a forum post. The white paper came from two of the heaviest hitters in the entire space, Ethereum's own co-founder, Vitalik Buterin, and Joseph Poon, who also co-created Bitcoin's Lightning Network. This was one of the very first serious proposals for what we now call a Layer 2, a way to scale up Ethereum without messing with the core protocol itself.
So what the heck is Plasma? Well, at its core, it's a framework for building what they called child chains. Just imagine these smaller, way faster blockchains that run alongside the main Ethereum chain but are still securely anchored to it. The genius idea here was to move the huge bulk of transactions off-chain onto these new, fast lanes which would ease up all the traffic on the main road.
The relationship was actually pretty simple to grasp. You had Ethereum, the parent chain. It was the ultimate source of truth, kind of like the Supreme Court that could settle any arguments. Then you had the plasma chains, the children. And that's where all the day-to-day stuff, the millions of fast, cheap transactions would actually go down.
Okay, so that's the high-level concept. But the magic and the problems are always in the details. So how did this thing actually work under the hood?
For a user, it was basically a three-step dance. First, you'd lock up your Ether or your tokens in a smart contract on the main Ethereum chain. That would basically give you a copy of them on the Plasma child chain. Then, step 2, you could go nuts on that child chain. Transact as much as you want, super fast and super cheap. And finally, when you were all done, you'd start something called an exit to pull your funds back to the main chain.
But hold on a minute. If all this action is happening off the main chain, what stops someone from just cheating? This right here was Plasma's most elegant innovation, something called fraud proofs. The system was what we call optimistic. It just assumed every transaction was valid unless someone proved otherwise. But if a bad actor, a malicious operator, tried to sneak in a fake transaction, anyone watching could cry foul. They could submit a fraud proof to Ethereum, and the main chain would act as the judge, check the proof, and then slash the cheater's funds. It was a brilliant, trust but verify kind of model.
So Plasma had huge throughput, it had low fees, and it had this really strong security. I mean, it sounded absolutely perfect. So, why aren't we all using it today? Well, like any tragic hero, Plasma had a fatal flaw, or actually a few of them.
It turns out those really elegant mechanics created some serious user experience nightmares. The biggest problem by far was that exit process.
To get your money out, you had to wait through this long challenge period. We're talking a week, maybe more, and you, the user, were responsible for watching the chain to make sure nobody was trying to steal your funds. On top of that, it couldn't really support complex smart contracts, so for the booming DeFi scene, it was basically dead on arrival. It was powerful, for sure, but just way too clunky for regular people.
And this is where the whole story pivots. The key difference between Plasma and the rollups that eventually replaced it, well, it all came down to one little thing: data. See, Plasma only posted a tiny summary of its transactions back to Ethereum. Rollups, on the other hand, post all the raw transaction data. Now that might sound like a small technical detail, but it changed everything. It made rollups fully compatible with complex DeFi apps, and most importantly, it made it way easier and faster for users to get their funds out safely. It solved the user experience problem.
So yeah, Plasma, our hero, was eventually superseded. But its story doesn't just end there. Because even though it was forgotten by most, its core ideas were so powerful that they're still alive today in the very technologies that replaced it.
I think this quote just nails it. Plasma is the forgotten pioneer, and rollups are the practical evolution. Plasma wasn't a failure, not at all. It was a necessary experiment. It asked all the right questions, and it proved what was possible, which is what paved the way for a more refined, more user-friendly solution to finally emerge.
And you can see Plasma's DNA everywhere today. That brilliant idea of fraud proofs, that's the exact security model that powers optimistic rollups like Arbitrum and Optimism. And that core architecture, a separate chain for doing stuff that's secured by the main chain, that is the blueprint for virtually every single layer 2 we use today.
And that's really the ultimate takeaway here. We often look for a single winner in technology, but that's just not how progress really works. Innovation is iterative. It's about one generation having a brilliant, maybe imperfect idea, which then allows the next generation to take it, refine it, and finally bring it to the masses. Plasma didn't win, but without it, we absolutely would not have the scalable Ethereum that we have today.
So Plasma proved that this whole off-chain scaling thing was possible. Then rollups came along and made it practical. But the story is not over. Those fundamental trade-offs between speed, security, and user experience, they still exist. So the real question now is, what will the next generation of scaling solutions have to sacrifice? And what will they build on the lessons of forgotten pioneers like Plasma?